You know what I just noticed about this program?
What is that, Jenny White?
It it does not have like a gradual cut down on the music. The music goes from like however loud I want it to be to zero.
Oh yeah, why don't you ask for an enhancement?
No, because every time well, we've complained about things before and then something weird happens. So I'm for once in my life, I'm going to keep my mouth shut. Just one time. So
Well,
you
might be a nice enhancement.
It might be, I don't know, but it's very weird and I'm not sure I'm nuts about it. So good morning, everybody. We got a nice audience this morning. And I was thinking to myself, gosh, I'm so glad that it's rainy so that we have time to bring our friend Robert Bortins in today to talk about something that is a very, what would you call it, Michael? Contentious? Is it contentious?
At the least, yeah, at the least.
Yeah, there's a lot of name calling that we do here, and there's a lot of, I'm not sure that there's a lot of necessarily
Critical
that's
thinking.
See, this is why I love you so much, because that's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say the words critical thinking. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, what a month you've had from fire to water. I figured maybe you're going to run off the podcast today with like a prairie mudslide or something coming in and going to take half your house out or something.
Well, there is that. Dave and I were working on the arc last night, but we just did not get it done. So I keep hoping it will stop raining at some point. But yes, I'm looking out the window today, and instead of fire, I am now seeing a giant wall of water coming down my driveway. So fire and water. I have now completed the circle.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's bring on our guest this morning because he's got a hard stop, which we're not used to. And we want to make sure that we have a chance to talk to him as much as we possibly can before his hard stop at 11. So without further ado, I am going to bring on our friend Robert Bortins, who is the CEO of a homeschooling program called Classical Conversations. Good morning, Robert Bortins. How are you?
Good morning, Jenny and Michael. Thank you for having me on the show today. Excited to be here.
You know what?
Yes,
I think you're the biggest celebrity that we've had on, certainly recently. I mean, we had Trent Luce on. He's a pretty big celebrity, but you're like becoming this huge celebrity.
Oh, I am. I'm sorry.
No, it's great. You've been on. As a matter of fact, I'm kind of a little jealous because I'm like, I have tried to get this information out for so many years, but you're making headway, and I'm so glad. So tell us about, you've been on the Sam Sorbo show, but you also went on another nationally recognized podcast just recently. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we were just on the Sean Ryan show. It's one of the top 5 podcasts. Sometimes it's the #1 podcast in the world. And we talked about homeschooling. We talked about classical education. We talked about why we reject government funding of education and why that is the core reason education is failing here in the United States. And it was a lot of fun. And it was great. I'm going to be on the Jenna Ellis show on the radio tomorrow morning. So back-to-back morning radio or podcast hits for me today and tomorrow. So it's been great, and just being able to get the truth out there. And it's been a wonderful burden. Sometimes, I didn't grow up or plan to become the school choice anti-evangelist and why it is morally wrong, why it will destroy Christian education, and it's just a path that we shouldn't go down.
Well, this is kind of sad because, I mean, apparently you don't love Jesus. That's really sad.
Yeah. Well, Thomas Jefferson said this, and I'm gonna read it. To compel a man to furnish contributions of money for the propagation of opinions which he disbelieves is sinful and tyrannical. Thomas Jefferson, Virginia Statute from Establishment Religious Freedom, 1786. And he also said in that same article, Almighty God hath created the mind free, that all attempts to influence by temporal punishment or burdens or by civil incapacitations tend to only beget habits of hypocrisy and meanness. And so, God gave civil government no jurisdiction over the mind. Certainly, God did not give the civil government jurisdiction to place financial burdens on families to educate their children in ways that they disagree with. And so the entire system is corrupt. And, I think the other side's arguing, well, it's going to be less corrupt if we move this corruption into private schools, into home schools. But that's just not the case. It's just spreading the cancer of, unearned dollars. Paul talks about how if you don't work, you shouldn't eat. He says that when he was with people, that he would go and work so that he wouldn't be a financial burden on them, even though he was doing ministry work. So we just don't understand the economics of the Bible. We've done this in higher education already, and we've seen our Christian institutions become pagan temples. Things like Harvard and Yale, even quote unquote some of the Christian institutions that haven't fallen so quick, like, Wesleyan University, they are now, basically pagan institutions. And so what happened? Christians stopped paying their bills and the federal government started doing it, or student loans, or just different economic schemes. So, we've seen this play out time and time again. And, if you go to the civil government, my God has cattle on 10,000 hills and will provide for us. But if you're going to the civil government to provide for you instead of God, it just says who your real God is.
I just was going to expect you to keep going because that was phenomenal. But I'm going to come back at you with this. So, Robert, is that the same Thomas Jefferson who wrote the letter to the Danbury Baptists, who said that there was no separation between church and state, or there was a separation, but hold on. Now I'm confusing myself. There was a separation between church and state. And so everybody, so many Christians are saying, well, that was just a letter to the Danbury Baptists. It's not in the Constitution. Then you've got people who argue that separation of church and state is in the Constitution. And I don't know if you know this or not, but in Oklahoma has generated the test case on this. So a Catholic online school, it's an online Catholic school, has sued to get money from Oklahomans to be able to have people to pay for the online school. And it's going to the Supreme Court. It's going to be heard today.
Yeah.
Yep.
No idea it was on the calendar for today. All I can say is, please, Jesus.
Well, I thought that was the whole purpose of bringing Robert on today, was this exact execution with the Supreme Court, Jenny.
You know what?
Yeah,
that must have been a God
planning
thing and not me. I'm giving God all the credit for that one. That was not me.
He does deserve all the glory.
Exactly. So why is it then that you and I disagree so vehemently with I disagree vehemently with just allowing the Supreme Court to hear it in the first place? But our state constitution literally says that we will not take state money and give it to a religious school or a private institution. So what do you think is going to happen in your estimation if the Supreme Court comes back with a favorable decision to allow the state of Oklahoma to pay public dollars to this private online Catholic school?
Well, so I think the kind of the issue is the kind of the Blaine Amendment. I think is what the amendment is basically that that public dollars can't be used for furtherance of religion, and so I think that's what they're going to try to overturn. If it gets overturned, there's a number of states like South Carolina and others that have had their school choice bills be deemed unconstitutional. And so I think the big scope of this is, if this is deemed constitutional, that it'll basically outweigh or just basically wipe out all of those measures that are in state constitutions, which would be tragedy. It would be kind of the end of Christian education in the United States because it's not funded through the means that God created. So that's the hope of it. Obviously, we've got, I think it's 5-3 or something like that, whatever the number is, 6-3, quote unquote, conservative justices on the Supreme Court, a number of Catholic justices. And so it's going to be, we'll need Jesus to intervene and hopefully get this stopped. So we'll see what happens, but I'm not, I do believe that this school choice is kind of the final death blow towards the republic. Once we can, once everyone is, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not envy. That is the root of Marxism, and it's also the root of the school choice movement. It's envying of our neighbors, what our neighbors have, and it's theft through government coercion. And so, really, our founding principles were trusting in God in our country and trusting in individuals as well as, free market solutions. And since school choice is just it's the culmination of 200 years of work to split up the families, to make the civil government pay for everything. And once the conservative side buys into this hook, line, and sinker, they'll buy into things like universal basic income, universal health care, universal housing. So universal education, which is what this is the final, in my mind, the final death blow to the republic, in which, Benjamin Franklin said, it's a republic if we can keep it. Well, now we see the end times of the Roman Empire, where everyone's just trying to fill their pockets with a depreciating dollar that's been inflated because of the corruption in the federal government and in our state governments, and everybody wants to live off everyone else's work. And as I think Margaret Thatcher said, the problem with socialism is you eventually run out of everyone's money. With the modern money theory, they hope that they can just print and print and print, which is just going to devalue and steal everyone's formal work. So, yeah, it's a sad day for our republic, and it's a sad day when you see Christian leaders and conservative Christian think tanks advocating that civil government is the answer to issues that God clearly demonstrates in the Bible. He never gave them authority over.
So let me read you something. This is a Substack. It's a writer that we know. And I'm going to read this to you just because I think it's a very educational look at the other side.
Mm-hmm.
The state's Parental Choice Tax Credit Act, because Oklahoma has one, which channels taxpayer funds to religious schools through parental choice, is a beacon of hope for Christian families seeking to educate their children in accordance with biblical values. Yet, the secular left continues to cry foul, claiming that public tax dollars funding religious schools violates the First Amendment's establishment clause. Their argument is a distraction rendered moot by a simple truth. The taxpayers footing the bill for Oklahoma's free public education are often not the ones benefiting from it. Until those paying the taxes are the same as those receiving the service, the debate over funding religious schools is a hollow exercise. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court's upcoming ruling on Oklahoma's St. Isidore of Seville Catholic School virtual school could cement this victory for religious liberty nationwide, ensuring that Christian parents can freely exercise their God-given rights. So, let me go to the first thing. Are you on the secular left?
No, I'm not on the secular left. I'm on God's side.
So you're not. So you're a Christian who believes that sending tax dollars to private religious schools is not a good idea.
Yeah, I've read the 10 Commandments, and it says, "Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt, not envy." Obviously that's paraphrased from the longer version. So, any sort of law that that breaks those, which of course we have many here in the United States, I don't support.
So here's the next argument. All taxpayers pay for public education. So, and they, not all of them benefit from it. I mean, our kids were educated by classical conversations. So we didn't, and other means, but classical conversations, homeschooling, we didn't pay for that. And yet my property is taxed. So I don't own my own home, because if I don't pay my property taxes, then they take my home, right? So I'm forced to pay for a system that I don't use. So lots of people are forced to pay for the system that they don't use. So isn't it only fair to make those dollars go to the school that I actually want for myself and my children? Isn't that just fair?
We don't live in a fair world. God didn't create a fair world. So we have single people who will never have children that pay taxes in their entire lives. I think there's a quote that's, I don't know who to attribute it to, but the government will break your leg and then hand you will give you some crutches and then ask for them to say thank you. And so, yeah, absolutely, we are taxed immorally. So we have immoral taxes going to an immoral system, and we want to spread that into our moral private schools and our home schools. So that's just, one of the things that Jesus said, and he gave an example in the New Testament, was the Romans and the Israelites had a kind of agreement where the Israelites had a lot of freedom compared to a lot of the other countries and people groups that they had conquered. But one of the things that the Romans could do was force them to carry their stuff for a mile, which is, of course, a tax on time, a tax on energy. All taxes are just your time and energy transformed into dollars. So it was one of the forms of taxation that the Israelites experienced compared to other countries. And Jesus said, when they asked him what he should do, he said, carry it a second mile. And so when homeschoolers and Christians pay for their own kids' education, as well as paying immoral taxes, we are, in fact, carrying our burden a second mile and showing them that the way, right? Christians are supposed to disciple the nations, and when you let the nations disciple you, which is exactly what this is, we see that, Johnny can't read. You said something about benefiting children. Well, 70% of kids in public school, roughly, can't read at grade level. So is it really even benefiting them that are in the system? And so, yeah, the system is corrupt and the system's not working. But the reason it's not working and it's corrupt is because the consumer, the person that benefits from it, isn't having to pay for it directly. And the same reason why we have sky high costs with healthcare here in the U.S., because we have had just insurance companies and different medical groups just kind of fleece the American taxpayer through the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare, which is just another universal step towards universal health care. So the civil government only has certain responsibilities, mostly around justice in the Bible. And so anytime the civil government, even if it's ordained by the people, step out of that, the situation becomes dire. And of course, we've seen our biblical worldview in our country collapse as the civil government has taken more responsibility over public education. We've seen obviously morality collapse. Boys can't even look down and see what they are anymore. We've got Johnny can't read. Sally doesn't want to have kids. So we see when the civil government takes responsibility for things that God gave the family government to be in charge of, that society collapses. And so one of the things that I'm happy or kind of learned in the last month or so is school choice has been debated since the founding of our country. And it was soundly defeated by our founders when it was brought up, 250 years ago. And so it wasn't until Horace Mann introduced Prussian, aka Germany, pre-World War I, education models into the U.S. It took us 200 years, however many generations that is, 5 generations, to lose the sense and to really have public education degrade our minds so much so in a kind of a flywheel manner that we are now going back to the same debate that our founding fathers defeated 250 years ago.
Thank you for that, but I'm going to give you another one. And the reason why I'm doing this is because there are a lot of well-meaning Christians out there that really believe that this is the only way for some children to have a quality education.
So let me address that question, because I hear that too.
Okay.
Right? But they don't ever, none of the rules or laws they're passing actually do that, right? They're actually, if you wanted to do something like that, and it's failed miserably in Louisiana, but Louisiana has a school choice program, but it's 200% of poverty level. So at least it's for the poor, right? If you're going to make that argument, at least have legislation that's for the poor. Like the Texas legislation, like you can be a billionaire and get tax dollars to send your kid to whatever school you want to. So,
in Oklahoma, our governor actually thought about taking some of his kids up on the tax credit, because ours is actually pretty high. Our lower one is about $60,000. You get about $7,500 if you have $60,000 worth of income, but it goes up from there. So
in North Carolina, it's a tiered system too, where you get more the less you make, so the more you make. Yeah. So we had during we had a big hurricane just destroyed our the western part of our state.
Yeah.
And while the western part of our state was getting destroyed, the Republicans, with the extra money that they stole from us, decided to approve the rest of the scholarships. Now, this is mid-year, so people have already paid their tuition and made their decisions for the rich. Because it was basically, if you made $0, you were first in line. If you made $1 billion, you were last in line. So it was the 5,000 richest people that applied for it didn't get it because the program had run out of money. Well, while Western Carolina was being flooded and those people needed help, they were busy giving a tax money away to the richest private educators in the state. And so, if civil government is supposed to, help the poor, we've had a war on poverty. We've spent trillions of dollars on that. I think we've lost that war. We've got more people in poverty than we've ever had before.
Well, LBJ didn't really want to help the poor people, so let's make that clear.
That's another 1 hour long conversation.
That's true.
Yeah, the bottom line is the civil government stepping in and helping the poor doesn't work because God didn't ordain the civil government to step in and help the poor. He ordained the church and families to help the people that are in their own family, and the government to help people whose family no longer existed, such as widowers and orphans. And so the more that we get away from that system, the poorer the results are going to be, and the more expensive it's going to be to obtain those results. And so, people like me, I give away tons of money to different charities, helping different sorts of organizations, but I pay tons of money to the civil government to do things God never jurisdicted it to do. And, while I get 10 times the return on my money, they get 10% of a return on the money they spend. And so it is it's a backwards country that we have, and Christians that continue to, say that we need to have a smaller government and then advocate for government to take over more portions of our education system and to suck back in those who have been rescued from the Marxist education system through bribery is immoral.
That was great. Okay, I want to show this because this is another conversation I want us to have. So Catherine says St. Isidore should contact the Catholic Church to pay for their school. How long before radical Islamic schools are also taxpayer funded? Slippery slope.
Right now in Texas, So
right now in
Texas
Oklahoma.
and in Oklahoma too, but I know Texas has 26 Islamic schools that will be almost fully funded by the conservative Republican taxpayer in Texas. They got an LGBT school that will be fully funded by the taxpayers. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know the specifics in Oklahoma. I'm sure you guys have some Islamic schools as well. And so the problem is, like, as abhorrent as that religion is to me, uh, you know, if you're paying for it yourself, like, go for it, right? If you're making the taxpayer, if they're making Jenny and Michael and whoever's listening to the show pay for the indoctrination of your kids into some radical ideology like LGBT, that's again immorally wrong. And so the thing is, and what they don't think is, like, people who are we're all hypocrites because we're all sinners and fallen short of the glory of God. But those of us who are actually trying to follow the Bible are going to be hurt the most by this, and those who are happy to ignore God's word will be the ones that benefit from it. So absolutely, the people of low moral character are going to be the ones that take advantage of it. The people who are happy to get rich off taxpayers are the ones that are going to benefit the most from it. People like Bill Gates, the Walton Foundation, Jeff Bezos, they are salivating at these school choice bills because they plan on buying up the schools and turning them into data mining operation of the children. You might not even know that you're sending your kid to a school run by one of these radical leftist think tanks. You think it might be a Christian school. But like I said, you can just look at higher education and how poorly Christian schools are being run and managed and how poorly they're educating people. I saw a study, I think Barna, and I might get the exact percentage wrong, but something like 37% of pastors have a biblical worldview. Well, it's not surprising when they didn't pay their own bills, when they got federal student loans to pay for it, that when the church isn't demanding that these institutions create pastors with biblical worldviews. So it's difficult if 37% of our pastors have a biblical worldview to expect much more in our congregations. And so, I think Barna has found about 9% of Americans have a biblical worldview. Less than 3% of Gen Z has been a biblical worldview. And so this is really the result of, our Christian leaders bowing down to civil government for nearly 200 years now, especially in the realm of education. And I just like to remind people, Marxism is an economics idea, and the idea is redistribution of wealth, taking from those who have and giving it to those who have not. And if school choice isn't a illustration of Marxist ideology, I don't know what is. And so we've got the rise of the kind of woke right, where they want to use the power of government for their benefit. And the power of government should be very small and very limited. And once you've established welfare programs such as school choice, they're very hard to wind down. And so ultimately what's going to happen, 5-10 years down the road, if not sooner, taxes are going to go up. The private school that your kids are in might be fine for a few years, but the schools that your kids' grandchildren are going to go to are going to be terrible because you sold out your family's freedom for a temporary tax relief.
Well,
I
and
think
just like we were talking a little bit earlier before the podcast, Jenny, whatever the government gets its hands on, the government never shrinks. They only grow. They only get bigger. They only have more control. They only suppress us more, take away more of our liberty. And right. So as now they're getting into this more private side of school that they've wanted to get into for a long time. I mean, that eventually that's what's going to happen. In my opinion, Robert, is it's going to look all, pretty in the beginning, but let's fast forward 10 years. I mean, it's going to be just another land grab, basically.
Yeah. So right now, so I like to call them useful idiots, or, it's like the Trojan horse, right? The person who opened the door to the Trojan horse thought he was doing a good thing, right? He did it. He said, "Oh, look at this. This is amazing." And so, he wasn't a leftist. He wasn't someone who was, on the other side or on the other team. He was someone who thought it was something that was a good thing to do for his city. And so the legislators, through the think tanks, have been, and through the donors, have been either bribed or coerced or misled into thinking that funding all these institutions is going to be a benefit to Christian education, to their people, that'll get them out of these quote unquote Marxist schools. Well, let's see. Why are they Marxist schools? Well, because they're funded by the taxpayers is the only reason that they are. It's also interesting because the public schools are fully and 100% controlled by the legislators and elected officials. And so if the elected officials who are in charge of our Marxist schools, no matter if they claim not to be Marxist, are now going to be in charge of our private schools, well, what's going to happen to them? The same thing that happened to public schools. And a lot of people don't know, like, public school early on was paid for by the families directly to the teacher. Businesses would pay for it, scholarships, things like that. And everything was 100% controlled locally. And so that was how public school mostly got started here in the United States. And they said, oh, we can make it cheaper and better if we give the control over to the state. And everyone's like, yeah, it'll scale. We can buy things at cheaper prices and blah, blah, blah. And the result is it's gotten more expensive and the quality has gone down.
So your microphone is got some kind of buzz in it. I thought it was originally
static or something.
My headphones, so I didn't say anything about it. But there's something in your microphone that we're having trouble hearing you because it's kind of. Try it now.
All right, I'll try it now.
No, it's still.
It's got a little static when you talk.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so I noticed that there are a couple of people on the feed. Yeah, it just sounds like static.
Well, and I tested it, Jenny, also just with our mics because I muted both of our mics while Robert was talking, and it is coming from his mic.
All right, we're changing some settings to see if it'll work.
Okay. All right. So while you're doing that, let me just point out a couple of things so that then hopefully you can talk on this. I wish I could remember her name. I'll have to go back and look at the podcast, but we had a lady on our podcast who runs a private school here in Oklahoma, and it's a private school for young kids. It's an elementary school, but they're building on every year. And we asked her and we said, why? She said, I'm not taking that money from the government. I'm not going to have anybody. If you want that tax credit, please don't come to my school because I'm not going to do that. And we asked her why. And she said, and here's the important part, which goes back to what you were saying about the Marxist and the curriculum. The state requires schools getting the tax dollars to be accredited by a specific accreditation organization. And the accreditation organization that they use is a secular accreditation association. And it's private, and there are several of them that they actually use. But the point of the matter is that for the school to get the taxpayer dollars, they have to be accredited. So if the private school says, oh gosh, I'd really like to have parents who, can't really afford it, we'd like to be able to get this tax credit. If they do that, the school then has to go through the accreditation process. Once they go through the accreditation process, now all of a sudden, it's not necessarily their curriculum. They have to do what the accreditation agency says that they have to do. And suddenly, this sweet little religious school is now able to take federal funding as well as state funding. And so now you have to bow to the Title IX stuff when Biden was pushing all that Title IX stuff because you took the federal tax credit. And I think people and parents don't understand this isn't just a simple question of, because my argument, and Michael's made the argument, you've made the argument beautifully, where whatever government money touches, government money corrupts. This is the specific reason, the accreditation issue.
Well, and maybe not just corrupts, Jenny. Maybe a better word is controls. Ultimately, they are going to control those schools. No matter what you think, how sovereign, whatever the schools run now, they are going to control that school at some point. When they are the main money going into that school, they will control it.
Yeah, can you guys hear me better now? We switched.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, we switched cords, so maybe the other cord got stepped on or something. Yeah, so I think, Donald Trump has said that he wants to put more money into school choice states. Well, when Kamala Harris gets elected in 4 years or 8 years or whoever the next one is, they can say, well, if you've got school choice and you can afford to give away millions of dollars to billionaires, like, why should we give you? And we're going to give you less money if you have school choice. So ultimately, the plan is to make school choice a political football, and so many people addicted to the money that they can't get rid of it. And I was actually at a conservative think tank event, and a person who's starting businesses or schools, businesses, yeah, they are businesses, in these states to collect this financial money. He said, well, what happens if they take the money away? And at this conservative event, the lady up there says, well, we just need to get so many people taking the money that becomes politically impossible to remove it. And of course, that's what we do for all of those. That's why we can't get rid of any welfare programs. That's why, even though Elon Musk and Doge is exposing so much corruption at the federal level, our Republican senators and House members still plan on funding all of those in the next budget, from what I've seen. So it is a truth that once these things kind of get established, and it doesn't matter how corrupt they are, and they will be corrupt. I mean, yes, it controls it, as Michael pointed out, but anything that goes against the design that God gave us will eventually get corrupted as well. And so, yeah, it is. It'll do to our K through 12 private schools just what it's done through our higher education Christian schools, that will ultimately make them bow down to different accreditors instead of parents, because as a conservative and as someone who wants our tax dollars to be spent responsibly, I do think that there should be checks and balances. I just was talking to a friend in Utah, and his homeschooling neighbor who took their voucher money spent it on a vacation to Disney World. And I saw a thing on Facebook where a mom remodeled her home in Florida and got it paid for by the Florida taxpayers, because she convinced the Florida people, well, they pretty much just, because they get so far behind, blanket approve everything, that it was part of the child's educational needs. They're buying big screen TVs, all sorts of things with these educational vouchers. And so ultimately, of course, it's just becomes common sense at some point that the government needs to put strings on it, and will put strings on it. But the invisible string of Marxism, that the government has jurisdiction over your child mind, is put on anyone who takes the money right away, that the government is responsible for educating your kid and paying for that education, and that they can do that by coercing your neighbors to pay taxes from their hard-earned money. I mean, I think I saw it's like most American, if you're a federal taxpayer, which not everyone is, the average federal taxpayer has to work till mid-May before they start seeing any money in their own pocket. And then, of course, you have state taxes, so then that's going to put you into probably early June. Someone like me who does do well financially, I probably don't start working for myself until July. So yeah, it's frustrating. I pay taxes in 22 different states because of our jurisdiction, and we do business in all over the country. But ultimately, I'm not necessarily happy to pay it, but I would rather pay that and have my educational freedom than pay that and have them capture my mind as well. And you hear that from like Christians who go to prison. They can put my body into prison, but they can't put my mind. They can't put my soul. Well, this is a attempt by the state governments to put your mind into a prison as well.
Well, and real quick, Jenny, just to dovetail on that just slightly, which you and I have talked about this multiple times, but I just, since there's so many people on here and probably new people, I just want to say, make one comment about when this was something that was told to me, Robert, by one of the top administrators. And I just want to give you an example of how these people think that are literally government employees in one way or another, these government schools. This top administrator literally told me that once the schools started, that we're talking just Edmond public schools, once they started feeding and transporting the kids, they became their kids. They're, it's not like I was making the argument, hey, these are my kids. I should be able to make the decisions about what's going on. They're like, no, once we started feeding and transporting, they became our kids. That's literally the mentality, I think that we're going to ultimately end up with from the government. The government's going to say, these are our kids.
Yeah. Well, MSNBC host Melissa Perry or something like a decade ago now, I was looking at it, basically said we need to stop, get away from this idea that they're your kids and come to this idea of our kids. Again, paraphrasing it. If you're on a conservative, it played like nonstop for months. But that's basically what school choice is. Like, she was a pioneer of the school choice movement with that statement, and the conservatives have bought it hook, line, and sinker. And, I've talked to, just a handful. So these are anecdotal. But if you think about it, it makes sense that the entitlement of these students that go to these private schools that they're not paying for is out the roof. Like, the teachers are miserable. The classrooms become miserable. I was talking to a friend who talked to one of the people administrating the program itself in Arizona. And he said, welfare, people on food stamps don't behave like these people. People who, are on Section 8 housing don't behave like this people. Like, the entitlement of this is my money, I'm going to spend it how I want to, of those people taking school choice money is like very different than your typical person on welfare who's like, I'm so thankful for this safety net. I'm going to get out as quickly as possible. Now, you got the people, of course, who abuse the system, but the people who really do just get into a bad situation. This is a permanent welfare program, mainly benefiting, especially if there's no income tax. It's typically 70% are upper middle class or more, already sending their kids to private school. So it's a redistribution of wealth from the taxpayer, typically in his property tax. So that's everyone in your state, typically to the wealthiest people in your state. And as soon as they start feeding your kids, you've given away. You've basically allowed them to become the parents of your kids. And it's no wonder that there's so many parents who say, well, I could never homeschool my kid because we don't get along. It's like, yeah, because you've given away all of your rights to the state to educate your kid. And it's just sad whenever I hear that. But I think you're absolutely right. We got to go to first principles. We can't, if we want to fix our country, we got to go back to the basics. Trying to rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic is not something I want to spend my life doing. I do talk to a lot of people who are in the conservative movement who are, older in life, 70, 80 years old. And they said, I spent my entire life trying to reform government paid education, public schools.
Yep.
And I just wasted my time, talent, and treasure trying to do something, because now I realize that, God's not going to allow us to redeem something he didn't establish in the first place.
Wow.
Well, you know what? Also, what kind of kills me, Robert, is you said you were talking about the redistribution of wealth. When I think about this, I think of the redistribution of the performance of education, because it's anytime you subsidize anything, I don't care what it is, and especially the thing that gets me also, Jenny, is in this state we're so oil and gas heavy. There's so many people that are in that industry, and then you've got alternative energy, green energy stuff coming in. They know how bad subsidized anything affects the performance and the cost of everything else. So when you look at that, Robert, when you subsidize education, look how bad public education has already done just in the last 10, 20, 30 years compared to, probably where it's going to go. It's just like anything. When you subsidize it, now you've taken away all the incentive to perform. There's no reason to act morally or do good work or do whatever, because someone else is paying for it. You don't have any skin in the game.
Well, and
Well,
I
God
want to
said-
make, I
the
want to
Bible
follow
really
up
quick
on that
said,
because you
Go ahead,
addressed
Jenny.
this you addressed this before, and I want you to readdress it because you said it so well before when your microphone was buzzing. You talked about the fact that Christians seem to want this, right? They've been propagandized to believe that they deserve this, which is firstly a wrong principle for Christians. We don't deserve anything. We're all sinners. We deserve nothing. So how we deserve and how it's fair for Christians to say, well, we need to get some of that money back. If you were truly a Christian, what you would do is, if you're a retired person and you're paying taxes to the public school, you would go out and find kids, or in your church, bring in people like single parents who have kids that need to be educated at home, or anything like that. There are other ways to attack this issue beyond having the state do it. And for Christians and conservatives to eschew all of that and say, no, we're not going to do that, that's not fair, and then say, but it's fair for the state to do it, how does that work again?
Like I said, I found the verse, 2 Thessalonians 3:8. Neither did we eat any man's bread for naught, but wrought with labor and travel night and day, that we might not be chargeable to any of you. So basically, we did not accept anyone's food without paying. On the contrary, we labored and toiled day and night, working so as not to be a burden to any of you. And so that is the model that was given to us by the disciples. And this is the exact opposite of that model, right? This is rejecting what is told us to do in 2 Thessalonians 3:8 for the model that Karl Marx gave us, which is to everyone by his means, and to everyone to their needs. And so the problem is, again, we've become so numb to the civil government intruding into our children's minds that every generation loses something. And like I said, our founding fathers knew better. They rejected school vouchers. But when Horace Mann introduced public school to the country, about a little bit over 200 years ago, and that has continued to degrade the family and continued to degrade the mind. The good thing is it took 200 years, more than 200 years, for us to buy this lie. But it goes back to the first lie. Satan told Eve and Adam, did God really say? And that's the same lie that Satan tempted Jesus with after the 40 days. And so now he's tempting that with Christians. And since we're, most of us have gone through the civil government's paying education system called public school, and we don't know how to read and analyze the text anymore. And so, we can read the Bible and just totally not understand the economic messages that are coming out of it. And so now
before
we find
you,
ourselves
because
today.
you're getting close to having to get off. So before you do that, I want you to talk to people about classical conversations. And I'm going to say this really quick one more time, even though I've said it before. I loved classical conversations, and all three of my kids, well, actually four, because I homeschooled the daughter of a single friend of mine.
Awesome.
So I had four of them in homeschool at the same time, and we loved classical. And my 20-year-old can even go back and talk about and sing some of the songs that we did in classical conversations, and learning Latin, and the whole thing. And so I constantly, when people say, well, I don't know how to educate my own kids, I always say, start with classical conversations. You just can't get a better foundation than that. Talk a little bit about that before you have to go.
Yeah, Classical Conversations, we were kind of created almost 30 years ago now to answer that question, because homeschooling was still relatively new and a lot of people didn't know how to teach certain subjects. And so Classical Conversations is a 1 day a week homeschool community where we have a full K through 12. We even have college courses. We have even master's degrees for parents, integrated, biblically based education system where you're homeschooling your kids, but you're getting together with a trained parent tutor who's there as a resource for you and your children to train you how to homeschool. We've lost the ability to parent in our country. We've, with over 50% of boys not living with their dad anymore, and that's been going on for 20 or 30 years. Most of us have no idea what parenting even looks like. So we have to redeem that, and we do that by getting into groups and studying the classics, the great books that have changed the course of human history, reading what the founding fathers thought, looking at original source documents, memorizing in the younger ages copious amounts of data, geography, math facts, Latin. And we do that with a system that has been helping students know God and to make him known. That's ultimately the goal of a Christian education, is to honor God in all that we do. And so, we're in all 50 states, we're in 60 countries, and you don't have to be expert at education to homeschool. You just have to be willing to do the hard work, and things that are worth it are hard, and things that are easy are very often not worth it. And so we like to say we help you as families do hard things at Classical Conversations, because God's very clear that that there's only going to be a remnant, and of course we see the world around us rejecting God and his laws, even people that we would agree with, even people that we sit in pews with at church. And it's because we have allowed the state to have jurisdiction over our children's minds when God gave it no such authority. And as a parent, the best thing you can do for your grandchildren is to homeschool your kids now. It might be tough. You are rejecting the ways of the world for God, but God says his ways are not man's ways, and that his goal is to help us flourish and to live the good life. And living a good life isn't keeping up with the Joneses. It's not working a job you hate to buy things that you don't need so that you can take a nice vacation once a year with kids that you never see. Living the good life is having a strong family, making sacrifices for each other, having what you need in life, not necessarily everything that you want. And, God is good to seek first the kingdom of God, and everything else is going to be added. And so Classical Conversations, we just want to help you live a flourishing homeschool lifestyle that honors the Lord, and to do that in community, because we all fail, we all fall down, we all need help. And when you're in a community of like-minded believers, there's people there to lift you up, to hold up your hands when you don't have the strength to do it anymore. And so that's what Classical Conversations is all about. And we're all sinners, and we fail at that vision all the time, but then we just stand back up again and start running towards our Lord.
Well, again, I am a firm believer in your program and enjoyed it just so much. And I think there's one last thing that I want to say before you leave. One of the things that I loved about Classical Conversations is you, especially when they're little, you're required to be in the class with them.
Yeah.
I mean, you go to the class with them. Well, how many parents today know what's going on in their classroom? How many parents are inside that classroom to know? What started with the pandemic was parents going, oh my gosh, you're learning that in school, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's one of my favorite things about Classical Conversations. I just can't tell you the warm fuzzies I have from all of the times I sat in class with my kids and got to listen to them recite stuff or talk. And then we talked about it on the way. I loved it. I think I told you this one time before. I think the only thing I hated about it was when they left, I was so sad. It was like I spent so much time with them. I was just broken when they left. I was like, I'm not finished. So now you need to get a college curriculum, and that would have kept him home longer.
Yeah, we're working on it. We're working on it, Jenny. Hopefully rolling something out soon. Yeah, I just like to challenge parents. Like, if you are in a public school system now and you just don't see a way out, just take one day off of work. Call the principal, tell them you're going to come spend next Wednesday with your student and follow them around in the classes because you're taking day off work and you want to help them out and see what happens. I just challenge you. We gotta stop being comfortably numb and start getting engaged in our kids' lives.
Amen. Robert, thank you so much for being on. You're an absolutely phenomenal spokesman for this. And thank you for all that you do. And thank you for getting out there and spreading this word. We just so appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you for having me. And I'm sure I'll be on again in the very near future. For anyone, if you don't mind, just follow me on X, The Robert B Show. And I've got a weekly podcast, Refining Rhetoric. We talk about this and a lot of other things. So, thank you so much for everyone for tuning in. And just please go read your Bible and go try to weigh these economic policies against what you see in God's Word.
Thank you, Robert. God bless you. And we'll have you on again soon, I hope.